Hello, welcome to my new YouTube channel, Quintillion Studios. I am going to be posting pretty regularly on here, which is going to be a detailed account, as detailed as I can get, of my very first attempt at developing a board game. Now, I have no experience in developing much of anything. I occasionally do a little art, and I try to be creative from time to time, making things like art on a tablet to working on renders in Blender. I do like to create passion projects, and this is going to be one of my biggest ones yet, hopefully. I'm trying to just post on here to keep me accountable. I find it's better if I'm actually posting something and I have an audience who can, keep me accountable, and I hope that you guys will enjoy it enough to where you want to see more of it, and if I know that you guys want to see more of it, it'll make me want to make more of it, and hopefully get the project done. Now, I'm not quite sure exactly how long it's going to take. Like I said, I'm a complete beginner. I've seen plenty of people say it could take months to years to maybe even over a decade. Hopefully not. I want to get this out as fast as possible, not just to necessarily rush out a product, but to just see what I can get out there. I'm a relatively busy college student, and so being able to work on something on the side and maybe get this done by the end of the year would be ideal. And now, that's a rough timeline. Do I expect to get it done? Not really, but I want to sort of set that as my goal, is to have at least a good point to where I have steps to follow towards releasing the game by the end of the year. This is just going to be the start of that, and I want to, in this video, just sort of explain what I plan to do with this game. Now, this game is going to be pretty stylized. I like to focus mainly on aesthetics in both my art and hopefully in this game as well. I want to try to do something with, space fighters. So the goal is to create a very stylized game that I think at least would be fun for me to play. That's one of my main inspirations, creating a game that I think would be very fun for myself to play. This comes with a lot of inspirations, and I'll list off here some that I think are very good games that you should play in your own right. Because I'm a huge board game geek. I've been into board games for a long time, including, D&D is a tabletop game, but also indie board games, many of which are my inspiration right here. Like, the first one that I think is the biggest is Dice Throne for me. Having that, dueling mechanic is really fun. I think that going one-on-one against another player who's controlling a character that works the same, but obviously has different functions, is a very cool design for a game. I like the idea of having, first of all, the box design, having mats that you can just unfold and play right there is super nice, super convenient, and I hope that if my game is at least 10% as clean and polished as Dice Throne is, then I think it'll be a pretty damn good polished game. Next is Eon's End, and this is going to be mainly where a lot of the mechanics come from. It is a cooperative deck building game. Now, the cooperative part can get thrown out the window, but the deck building is what I really want to focus on. It tries to take luck completely out of the factor of a deck building game. You never shuffle your deck, and the only thing that's randomized really is the turn order and the order of actions that the boss, or in this case the nemesis, does each turn. It really focuses on what you can do with your upgrades and how you can make your character, a mage in this case, work with the team. Now, obviously, I'm not trying to make the characters here or the ships here work with the team. I'm just trying to make them, good on their own. But I like the way that you upgrade, the process of upgrading and building a deck and creating something, really powerful from something that's not too interesting, at least at the start, even though there are some mages that are very interesting. But I could get into hours and hours talking about how much I love Eon's End. Now, the next game that's kind of a sort of combination of what I think the two above is Command of Nature. Now, this is a very good game, really good game by Unstable Unicorns that does an amazing job of just creating a fun and extremely aesthetically pleasing dueler. What I said about Dice Throne being polished, this game is just as polished as well. It's super clean, the art style is amazing and consistent, and I love, again, having different characters that you can play that have different functions and that go against each other. This is probably one of the biggest inspirations for me. The only thing that's slightly different is that I want to focus on upgrading characters and upgrading the ship itself rather than just the deck, but even still, one of my top games of all time, and I think that you should really give it a play. Command of Nature by Unstable Unicorns, top-notch and a huge inspiration for this game. And the last big inspiration, at least in the terms of terms of board games is Moonrakers. The thing that's special about Moonrakers for me is that not only are the aesthetics of, you know, a sci-fi spacefaring game a big inspiration, but the way that you upgrade ships is also really cool, I think. By having permanent upgrades that stay on your mat the entire time, it really allows you to get into builds that can go far. You know, you can be specialized into one niche, you could try to be a jack of all trades, and you can set up some really interesting combos that allow you to basically do a lot of things on one turn. Now, I don't want to get into the mechanics of the game too much here, but being able to buy upgrades that stay on your ship the entire game is a big inspiration for this, and I want to basically be the main mechanic of this game by focusing on upgrading your ship for the long run and almost having the deck building be secondary. I'm still unsure how much I want each one to play a role. Maybe the deck building is going to be more prominent and the ship upgrades are going to be less prominent, but at least as it stands in my head right now, I want the upgrades that you put on your ship to be the main ones that you focus on, because I like having a build that you can do for the entire game, similar to what I'm going to go into next, some of my video game inspirations, something that you can have for your entire run. Think like Jokers in Balatro or Relics in Slay the Spire or other similar things in other games that allow you to go further and to have permanent upgrades that stick with you that can change the whole flavor and the whole feel of the game or that run. These, like, okay, another good example, boons in Hades or other artifacts in one of my main inspirations for aesthetics as well is Cobalt Core, a pretty good indie roguelike game that's kind of what I'm almost basing this off of, the idea of dueling starships, but I want to, you know, streamline it into a more aesthetic, more you know, playable on a tabletop version. Not to say that Cobalt Core isn't a good game, it's an amazing game, one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard, and amazing mechanics, but I want to just lay out my inspirations here, and Cobalt Core is a very big one of them. Just to briefly touch on what I have for the game so far, because I've talked a lot about what's inspired me and why I want to do this, but in terms of the game itself, I don't have much. I don't even have a title. It's my dueling starships game so far. That's all I really have for it. Now, I do have some things, like I mentioned, about how I want the upgrades to work and how I want the ships to function and how I want the actual combat to go, but I can get into that more in a later video. What I want to mainly discuss now is just the aesthetics and just what I have in mind. The main aesthetics that I think I'm going for are, you know, kind of the tropes of sci-fi that I'm just going to sort of list out here without going into too much on how they play. I want to have sort of a technological AI-run hive mind faction that I think is a very good trope in sci-fi, along with the counterpart to that being the sort of organic tech faction that, you know, living spaceships, think almost Cylons, except less techy, more like plant-based. And then kind of pairing off those to a little bit of middle ground, almost, is, if you can call it a middle ground, is the, like, a scrapyard faction, something that's sort of like pirates almost, building their ships out of whatever they have. This sort of faction can definitely play into randomness a little bit. I don't want to have too much randomness in my game, but I think that having a faction that is based heavily on just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks is a pretty cool idea. Which leads me into my military faction, which is kind of the opposite of that. Just overwhelming force, but not much adaptability. That's what I want them to play as, a big, like, you know, galactic empire of sorts that just sort of crushes everything in its way without much finesse or flair. The last two that I want to touch on is a sort of a techno corporation. Not techno, because I don't want them to be too similar to the AI from before, but like, you know, space capitalism. Think Helldivers or Starship Troopers, where they're really playing into the capitalist stereotypes in space, having a big evil corporation pulling the strings of this ship. Now, I'm not quite sure how I want them to function. I want to make them different enough from the other factions that I've mentioned here, but I also want to make them, you know, fun and playable and not something that doesn't make any sense or breaks too many mechanics. This is going to be one that takes some workshopping. I might even have a couple videos just dedicated to getting the corporation faction to work, but we'll see how complicated it is. Maybe I'm overthinking it, and maybe I actually do have some ideas buried in this brain, and I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments if you have any ideas on what sort of mechanics to include in the corporation faction. And lastly is something that I've always found interesting in sci-fi settings, which is having a sort of, I guess you could call it space magic. I like to think of it like a very advanced form of maybe an extra dimensional being, or, you know, something from a higher dimension that doesn't necessarily obey our laws of physics. something that looks like magic from the outside and really, for all intents and purposes, is magic in a sci-fi setting while still maintaining the vibe of this is very clearly sci-fi and not just fantasy. It's something that I think would be very cool and could definitely change up the mechanics of the game, but again, I want to keep these all in line so that none of them are too overpowered, which is going to be another big issue. And it's seeming pretty daunting to me right now, but I know that if I keep posting this kind of content on here on YouTube, and I keep pushing myself to make this regularly, and hopefully you guys can push me to keep making this regularly too, then I can get a finished product out here by the end of the year. It's ambitious, very ambitious. I'm not quite sure how much time I have, but it's something that I really want to focus on and something that I really want to get done and, make work. It's gonna be hard and it's gonna be tricky along the way, but I know that if I put my mind to it and really put my nose to the grindstone when it counts, I can get this done, and hopefully you guys will share the journey with me of making something for the first time ever, something of this scale. It's been a dream for a while, and I think that a lot of my motivations, which I'll talk in passing about in future videos, have really pushed me to, take the jump this year and make something that sticks, make something that I think I can be proud of in the long run. But this is me signing off for Quintillion Studios. I hope to see you again soon, and I hope that you'll share this journey with me for the long run.